Good afternoon, 7th grade. It is Thursday, April 16th. We are back in world history today. We are on page 384, 24.4, changes around the world. So this is still during the Cold War era, but we've talked a lot about communism and its spread, but there are other events that are also going on throughout the world in other countries. So let's look at the Middle East first. Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. In 1945, France granted independence to Lebanon and Syria. And in 1946, Jordan became independent of Britain. The new nations struggled to establish Western-type governments, but because they had little experience to fall back on, they were open to Soviet influence. The history of Israel goes back to biblical times. In AD 70, the Romans destroyed the temple at Jerusalem, and the Jews were forced to flee the land of Palestine to countries all over the world. The Jewish people were without a country or national government for almost 2,000 years. It is amazing that such dispersed people would retain their national identity and not be absorbed into other nations for that period of time. With the Balfour Declaration in 1917, Great Britain expressed its desire to establish Palestine as a national home for the Jews. In 1922, the League of Nations placed control of Palestine into the hands of Great Britain, allowing Jews to settle there. The Holocaust resulted in many Jews fleeing Europe into Palestine. As the number of Palestinian Jews grew, Arab hostility increased, and the British attempted to limit Jewish immigration. British policies in the region continued to irritate both the Jewish and Arab Palestinians. After all, why does Great Britain need to tell us what to do? This isn't a country owned by Great Britain anymore. They should have no say-so. As a result, the British gave control of Palestine to the United Nations in 1947 because they were just done. They're like, look, you're going to complain to us, fine. Here, United Nations, catch. It's your ball now. And the UN proposed the division of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. And in May of 1948, Israel became a nation under the leadership of David Ben-Gurion. Christians throughout the world saw this as a major step in the unfolding of God's prophetic plans for Israel in its last days. Wars erupted between Israel and its Arab neighbors in 1948, 1956, 1967, and 1973. And miraculously, literally within a couple of months of Israel's formation, 4 to 5 countries attacked Israel at the same time, and Israel is able to just whoop all 4 and 5 of these countries by themselves because they have a lot of their technology and science from Western Europe and America, and they are very smart people. In May of 1948, Israel became the nation under that. So, border disputes though still continue to occur frequently, even though Israel was able to beat their enemies. In 1979 at Camp David, U.S. President Jimmy Carter persuaded the Egyptian leader Anwar al-Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin to agree to a peace treaty. And this was the first time in history that Jews and Arabs sat down at a peace talk because they couldn't stand each other, but Jimmy Carter managed to bring them both to the table. In 1979, a revolution encouraged by U.S. liberals deposed the Shah of Iran, who strongly opposed communism. Iranian rebels under the Ayatollah Khomeini, a powerful Muslim religious leader, captured the American embassy in Tehran, the Iranian capital, and took American diplomatic personnel hostage. The hostages remained in captivity for 444 days before their release in 1981. Iran and Iraq fought each other from 1980 to 1988. Their conflict spilled over into the Persian Gulf, and the United States had to use its naval power to ensure the safe passage of oil tankers in the region. In the years following World War II, as European colonialism was breaking up, European colonies in Africa and Asia became independent nations. This created a third world, neutral nations not yet aligned with either freedom or communism. But both the United States and the USSR attempted to win these nations to their sides. This created a new threat and a new theater for the Cold War as communism spread to many third world countries. And let's talk about one of Britain's colonies. You see, even though Britain didn't want Russia to have colonies, Great Britain still has colonies all around the world, one of these being India. Britain had led all of Europe in abolishing colonialism. Even before World War I, Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu nationalist and spiritual leader trained in London, had been working for India's independence. And after World War I, he was joined by Jawaharlal Nehru. Gandhi's advocated passive resistance. Resist, but not violently. passively, or civil disobedience, as a peaceful but forceful method for India to get what it wanted from Britain. He led numerous labor strikes and hunger strikes and encouraged the native Indians to stage protest marches in areas where British law forbade them to go. Both Gandhi and Nehru were jailed for their leadership in civil disobedience, but their following continued to grow. England was in a weakened condition after all following World War II and was ready to relieve itself of the financial burden of colonialism. Since there was so much dissension in India between the Hindus and Muslim minority, it was decided to divide India into two separate countries, India for Hindus and Pakistan for Muslims. Pakistan was subdivided into East Pakistan and West Pakistan. India and Pakistan both became independent members of the British Commonwealth in 1947. Most other British colonies eventually followed their example and became Commonwealth nations. With Indian encouragement, East Pakistan declared its independence in 1971, becoming the new nation known as Bangladesh. In 1957, Ghana, or the Gold Coast, became the first black African nation to achieve its independence. Ghana's leader, Kwame Nkrumah, wanted to form a socialist confederation or alliance of all African nations. In 1966, Nkrumah was ousted in a military revolt, and he later helped establish the Organization of African Unity. By the late 1960s, the British, Dutch, and French colonialism in Africa and Asia had broken up, and most of these former colonies had now become independent countries. Independence for these new countries was fraught with problems, however, creating an open invitation for Soviet communism to exert its influence and take over. The United States sought earnestly to help these new nations establish democratic governments, joining the cause of freedom. And then lastly, let's look at Japan, because remember, Japan at the end of World War II is devastated, but their recovery is something worth talking about. Between 1945 and 1952, General Douglas MacArthur, an American, served as the military governor of occupied Japan, and at first, the Japanese were terrified, because after all, they had gone to war with America. They're thinking, here's this guy, he's going to treat us like dogs, essentially. He's not going to give us any freedoms. But he was the opposite. He loved these people. He encouraged Christianity, love between brothers, and he sought to solve Japan's spiritual problem. One of the fruits of this missionary effort was the conversion of Mitsuo Fuchida, the same commander of the squad that bombed Pearl Harbor. General MacArthur also encouraged Japan to develop a democratic government and free enterprise economy. American business planners helped modernize Japanese industry. As the United States had hoped, Japan gradually assumed the role of an economic powerhouse in Asia, and by raising the economies of all non-communist Asia, hindered the spread of communism in the region. Japan, even today, is a huge economic beacon in Asia. I mean, that little island country produces so many goods, and the people are happy and doing well. It is a shining beacon of what the American capitalist system can do. And that ends today's section at 24.4. Please make sure that you are doing the section review. Just do the odds only. And with that, I will talk to y'all later.